One of my daughters has begun asking questions and searching differences between beliefs. Should we help her or should we leave her to figure it out on her own?
I don't know what help her means. Every one of you have been on a journey. You have been on a journey in experiencing, trying to understand why you exist, who created existence, what expectations there may be, etc. You're on this journey to understand why. It says, one of my daughters has begun asking questions and searching different beliefs. When you become aware that there are other people that believe other things, why wouldn't you be curious what they are? Almost every one of you was not raised in this. So you're in this because you questioned. So don't fault them for questioning. Like I said, every one of you has been on your own journey. Every child that you have needs to go on their own journey. Not by you pushing them on it, but at some point they're going to realize, I don't have answers to some of these questions. I only know what you taught me. All right, let's start zone one, and we're going to begin with John and Shelley.
So I have 3 questions, and my wife has one. My first one is should every male know how to blow the shofar?
I don't know that I would say that you are required to learn to blow the shofar. The shofar was blown by who in scriptures? The priests, okay? So I think that, it's not something that I would say you have to learn how to do. It's certainly a fun thing to do. I like blowing the shofar, but then again, I was a trumpet player as a child and throughout my, young adult life. So, and I blew shofar in the synagogue and that kind of thing. So, I've always had sort of a connection with the horn. So no, you're not required to, but if you want to, you're certainly welcome to.
Cool. All right, my second question is from Matthew chapter 7, verse 6. It says, do not give what is set apart to the dogs, nor throw your pearls to the swine. So in what my wife and I do for a living, we help people in and out of drug and alcohol counseling and stuff like that. She does mental health, first responding and stuff like that. Is it okay that when we're talking to people, like we use an example, the money mastery and level up that you teach us, is us talking to them about the things that you teach us, throwing the gold nuggets that you give us to them?
No. Look, let's get the context of this. When you read what he's saying in Matthew, if you go a little further in that same verse, it says, lest they trample them under their feet and turn and tear you to pieces. So we're really talking about why would you share this with someone who's basically going to be triggered by it? Okay, so it's not that you don't want to share things with anybody, and I'm certainly not saying that we're in a Christian evangelical sort of idea of going out there and evangelizing people, but if you think that something that comes up, warrants you sharing a piece of information that might benefit them, you need to have a certain level of discernment as you're having that conversation, whether or not this is going to turn into them wanting to tear you to pieces. Okay, which let's take it into a kind of a watered down version. In other words, where it's going to get into a somewhat heated argument. Okay? We don't need to and should not be on purpose going and causing arguments with people. We want to share and discuss at times with people that may want to listen and share and discuss with us as well, if that's the case, in the situation. But, for example, if I'm talking to somebody and I don't know where they are in their walk or anything else, or somebody new that I just met somewhere, I'm not thinking about sharing anything with them, okay? They may ask me about my beliefs because they're like very Christian or very something and they want to evangelize me in some way, okay? So what I generally do with people is that, I'll ask them where they are, or they'll ask me what I do for a living, and I say I'm a rabbi, I'm a Messianic rabbi. And so they'll start to ask me some questions. Not always, sometimes. And so my answer, before I answer any questions, is I'm a good Jew. I ask a question from the answer. That's how I answer the question, right? Answer the question with a question. So the question I ask them, though, is, how's your walk doing, And if they tell me how wonderful it is, that is this verse about ready to happen, okay? They're not interested or ready to hear me do anything that might disturb that. Oh, my walk is great. I have the best this. My church is the best this and everything. Me and the Lord were like the closest things you ever heard of, whatever, right? Okay, I'm not going to disturb that because they're not going to listen anyway, okay? Now, if they tell me that their walk is all messed up and they don't know where they're going and everything else, they still might not be ready to listen. But I might gently see if they have an interest by asking more questions, again, be probing them for information about what are the issues with your walk, what's going on, what's going on. I mean, I turn into counseling mode, okay? I'm not in sharing mode. And the reason I'm not in sharing mode is that I don't know what I'm sharing for. I don't know what their situation is. Why am I sharing? Well, because they're lost. No, they're whatever they are, but that's not my reason to share with them. Okay, I'm looking to share with those that he has popped and poked that may be ready to hear. All right? So I just want to know if they're in that state. Okay? Now, just because they're not happy with their walk and not happy with something doesn't mean that their bubble was popped. It just means they might not like the church they go to. Or they may have frustration with some of the friends that they walk this walk with or whatever, or family members. I want to know if they're ready to have a conversation. Now, when you mention things like Money Mastery and Level Up, look, if they're talking about other life-type stuff, sure, you can recommend those kind of programs because those are life things regardless of your religious beliefs. Of course, they're taught in a scriptural sort of context and foundation, but they're still things that anybody could benefit from. You know, how to fix your finances and basically level up all 7 areas of your life or whatever. But hopefully, John, that makes sense that when it comes to having a conversation, I flip it around to first make sure where they are before I share anything that might cause this problem with the, tearing you to pieces. Now, bear in mind, he is talking to a crowd that's filled with those that are doing the problem in the beginning where they're judging. He says, don't judge lest you be judged. Okay? So his audience is different than just the average person you're going to run into.
All right, thank you. My third question is from 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verses 3 through 6. If you could help me understand verse 6 in context.
All right, let's see. 2 Corinthians 10, 3 through 6?
Yes.
Okay, so though we walk in the flesh, we do not fight according to the flesh, for the weapons we fight with are not fleshly, but mighty in Elohim for overthrowing strongholds, overthrowing reasonings, and every high matter that exalts itself against the knowledge of Elohim, taking captive every thought to make it obedient to Messiah, and being ready to punish all disobedience with your obedience when your obedience is complete. Okay. You know what? I need to make a note to make sure to add this to the teaching that we're doing right now, because this would be a good section to kind of put in there. Okay, but I'll address it now anyway. Okay, so the context here, look what it says. We walk in flesh, we do not fight, though we walk in flesh, we don't fight according to flesh. Against what? The stuff inside you. This is an internal battle. Okay? So when he talks about and being ready to punish all disobedience, you're going to smack it down in yourself when your obedience is complete. In other words, when you are complete and filled to capacity with understanding what is obedience, you can then choose to smack down when the flesh wants to do something that's disobedience. Okay, John, does that help?
Absolutely.
Okay, because by the way, verse 5 is all about things that's going on inside of you. When it talks about reasonings and high matters that are exalting itself, knowledge of Elohim, this is all stuff that's going on inside you. Okay? Okay.
Yes.
All right, Shelley?
My question is pertaining to Judges chapter 11, where it talks about Yiphta's daughter.
Right.
Could you explain to me what her going to the mountain to wander and bewail her maidenhood with her friends meant?
No. Okay. I look, there's a lot of stuff that, let me rephrase that. I find the stuff hardest to really explain is the stuff that happens in the writings. Things like Judges, 1st and 2nd Kings, 1st and 2nd Samuel, Chronicles, etc. Because these were accounts of things that were happening as opposed to instructional things. And so it's really much harder to have the right context to understand what's happening when this description of what's happening is limited to what you get to read and probably very easily understood by the people who were then, who had the right context and framework of that culture at that time and what was happening in that place. Because context has all of that in it, right? Where you are, when you are, what's been going on, what culture is going on. All these things are part of the context. So I struggle at times to know exactly what to do with some of the things in the writings accounts. The accounts of just what life was going on and what people were doing. Same thing in the book of Acts, actually, to a certain degree, because the book of Acts is very much like that, okay? It's like what you read through Chronicles or Kings or Samuel or Judges, etc. All right? So I don't have a good answer for that.
Thank you, then. I was just curious. I didn't know if it was something that pertained to like us now or if it was just, so it's just a cultural thing.
Look, the stuff that you need to worry about starts off with, and Yahweh said to Moshe.
Okay, great. Thank you, Rabbi.
Generally speaking, okay? Or Yeshua says it directly, okay? Or the apostles are trying to explain something Yeshua said, right? Okay, those are the ones that are really much more for us. Especially when the letter is written by one of the people, like a James or a Peter, that says, this is written to all of you in dispersion. So then you know it's for you.
Question, would you consider yourself from the tribe of Judah or from the tribe of Levi?
You don't consider yourself from something. Okay, I am from the tribe of Judah. That's a lineage birth. Okay.
Okay. All right. I think that answers my question.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
I am half Levi because my mother's side is Levi. Okay, but my father's side is Judah. Okay, so it's a lineage thing. It's not something you consider yourself.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, this one's from SBT 1956, Steve in Timberton, New Mexico. In Leviticus 23:3, can you elaborate on a Kodesh gathering, i.e. weddings, birthdays, graduations, for clarification on Shabbat?
Yeah, that's a good question. We do cover that in the Shabbat teaching, okay? So there, in the CC 101, there is a teaching on remember the Sabbath day or something like that, so there's a Sabbath teaching. But I'll answer the question. Okay, so the verse is talking about what's called a Mikra Kodesh, a set-apart gathering, a commanded assembly. And so these are treated like a Shabbat. But now the question is, well, what about weddings, birthdays, graduations, funerals on Shabbat? Okay, the point of the set-apart, the Mikra Kodesh, the set-apart gathering, is that it's for the single purpose of being focused on Him, okay? So the things you just listed there focus on other things other than Him. A wedding focuses on the bride and the groom. Not a bad thing, just not the day for that, okay? It should focus on the bride and the groom. As a matter of fact, when you guys go to weddings, give the groom some attention. All right, so everybody focuses on the bride, of course, because she looks beautiful and all that other stuff, okay? But it's about the bride and the groom, okay? But if you're doing it on Shabbat, you're not focusing on Him, you're focusing on the bride and the groom. People say, oh, but we're doing it in a religious ceremony and in Yeshua and Yahweh's names, and it's still about the bride and the groom, okay? The attention, the focus, properly, okay? And if you're celebrating somebody's birthday, okay, and I'm not one that makes big deals out of birthdays, but some people do, okay? I'm very happy to acknowledge that you're getting older, especially if you hit a milestone, you know? You're a kid and you turn 18, that's a big deal. Maybe you turn 13, now you're a teenager, it changes everything, right? Then maybe, what if you hit a milestone like, so you're 50, okay? Or you're 70, or whatever, you get to a certain point, every year's a milestone. Hey, made it to 72, and 73, and 74. Okay, but, it's still about that person, right? Because we're giving some honor and respect to the fact that they're hitting these milestones, right? And we're encouraging them about that, et cetera, celebrating it with them. By the way, I'm still a much bigger fan of the idea that on your birthday, you should be taking your mother out. She did the work. You didn't do anything. You just showed up. Why are we doing anything about you? All right. Anyway, Graduations, same thing. Congratulations to the hard work and the person graduated and all that stuff. It should be honoring and respecting and encouraging them in the work that they did and the accomplishment that they made. Again, not a Shabbat thing. All right? Look, my wife was raised as a Sabbath keeper. And so what that means is that she missed all her graduations. But you know what? She still graduated. Because they happened to do almost every graduation she had on Shabbat. Okay? So since they did it on Shabbat, she didn't go. But she still got the certificate. She still graduated. Okay? So she didn't get to wear the outfit and shake the hand and get to take the picture and whatever. So what? She still graduated. You know, you don't put the picture of that on your resume. You put that you graduated on your resume.
My question is, like 2 weeks before Pesach and stuff, my mother, she's in her 90s, and she had a heart attack, and she was, like 3 times they said, this was it, she was going to die, and then nothing happened. And so my question was, how do you pray for people in that situation?
Look, when you're dealing with somebody in a health condition or anything like that, especially if they're, older, right? They get to be in their 80s, 90s, that kind of thing. I'm always praying that the Father knows what's in their best interest. The Father knows what they need and where they're at and what's best for them. I mostly want them to have shalom. Okay? Mm-hmm. I'd like them to be at peace. I'd like them to have no pain. I'd like them to be not suffering. Okay? I'm not a big fan of life extension just for the point of getting older. Okay? There should be some quality of life. All right? And so, I'm not one that wants to pray for someone to live longer when they're miserable and they'd rather not. Okay? Yeah. They'd rather just let me just go to sleep, hopefully that I don't wake up and it's all done. And people get to that point at times, okay? And I can understand that, and I'm okay with that. I know that the person who's their relative or friend, whatever, the person who's close to them doesn't want them to go away. Well, that's kind of selfish of us, all right? You really should be thinking of them, okay? And realizing that, you know what? If they get another 3, 4, 5, whatever years, and it's miserable and pain and whatever, what's the point of that? Just so you can have them around? Okay, there's no point to that. So I don't pray anything specific. I leave it in his hands. I just pray the least amount of pain, the least amount of suffering, and the shalom. If they can have that and be alive and functioning, great, great. Otherwise, look, I've prayed when my father was really at the end, and he was really miserable and suffering. I was just praying, and I think my whole family was let him just go to sleep one of these days and just not wake up, which is what eventually happened, because he was just miserable. He was in pain. He was in anguish. And his mind was going, and he was in physical pain. Or his mind convinced him he was in pain. We couldn't tell the difference, because sometimes he would be in physical pain, other times he wouldn't be in any pain, and nothing really changed except that his head was wherever it was. And it was just going to be the best for everybody if he could just go to sleep and be done, okay? Especially for him. And so my prayer was, Father, whatever in your mercy is the right thing to do. Please either fix this so he can have some quality of life, or just let him go, take him, okay? So that there's no reason to just exist in a miserable condition, okay? And so...
It just felt kind of weird.
Yeah.
It felt weird praying for him. I'm praying for her, that she would die. I kind of had in my head, that it was wrong. Not that I would pray that she would die, but that, if it was, time for her to go, that she not be in pain.
Right.
And,
right.
But it just felt weird, praying.
Well, let's think of it like a conversation. Well, hold on. Let's think of this like a conversation you may have had with her. I've had this conversation with my father. We've had this conversation with my wife's father, or at least she might have had this conversation, saying, it's okay. You tell them it's okay, you can go. Because sometimes they're only holding on because they don't think you'll be okay. You have to tell them it's okay to let go. Life is something that we have partially because we hold on to it. Okay? This is why you have a very high percentage of people who pass away, within very short order, their spouse passes away because they don't want to hold on anymore. I mean, part of life is willpower. You have a will to live. And so there are those that are holding on because they don't think it's okay to go. All right? So it may be that you know, when you get to that situation, you can let them know, we're going to be okay, Mom. We're going to be okay, Dad. It's okay. You can just go to sleep, and it's time. It's up to, you know, just give them permission in a nice way. Don't tell them, like, I wish you would go already. I'm tired of carrying you around the room and wiping your butt and stuff, but, you know, but I'm saying is, just let them know it's okay. Because they don't want to be around either at that point, all right? But they may feel they have to or something. Sometimes they're waiting for a family member to show up, okay? I think my father was waiting for my brother from the West Coast to fly in and show up because he passed right after he did, okay? Almost like a final goodbye thing, you know? Okay, did that help at all, Janet?
Okay. Yes, it did. It did. It made more peace there.
All right,
So
good.
yes, it did. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, fantastic.
It is out of 1 Corinthians, is my question.
Okay.
Chapter 7, verses 18 through 20. When it talked about being in the circumcision and they're going back and forth and at the end, let each one remain in the same calling in which he was called, right? My question is, I think I might know the answer, but I'm just asking for clarification. Are they speaking about the birthright or about the covenant or both?
Neither. They're not talking about any of that.
Neither.
They're not talking about any of that. Look, and by the way, you've been around long enough that you've heard me explain this, but I'll explain it again anyway, okay? It says here, was anyone called while Jewish? Let him not become Jewish. Was anyone called while a Gentile? Let him not become Jewish. Excuse me, well, if you were called when Jewish, don't become a Gentile. If you were born and come in as a Gentile, don't become a Jew. He just uses these phrases interchangeably. Was anyone called while Jewish? Let him not become a Gentile. Was anybody called while a Gentile? Let him not become a Jew. He says the circumcision, in other words, what you were born doesn't matter whether you were born Jewish or Gentile. That doesn't mean anything about whether or not you need to get circumcised. This is Paul's annoyingly weird way of talking about Jews and Gentiles. Okay? Did that answer it?
I think that's why I'm asking about birthrights, because then the Jews were the chosen.
No, what
and
happened?
They were
Look,
circumcised after they gave.
Look, we see this today, but they saw it much more frequently back then, which is a new person coming in, all of a sudden thinking they need to become a Jew. You need to become a Torah observant Israelite. You don't need to become a Jew. Okay? And that's what was happening in Yeshua's day, and then it was happening here, obviously, in Paul's day, you know, as Paul is talking to the Corinthians, and that was a problem all throughout, you know, the early first century congregation, is that when people came in, they thought, well, then we need to become Jews. No, you need to become covenanted. Okay? And so Paul consistently and annoyingly uses circumcision to say Jew, and uncircumcision to say Gentile. And if you read him throughout, that is always what he's doing, okay? He is never actually talking about, or maybe one place somewhere I might miss, whatever, about actual physical circumcision. When he says the uncircumcision or the circumcision, he's referring to those born in covenant, which, by the way, you can't become born in covenant. You either were or you weren't. Okay, you were born however you were born. But you can choose to be under covenant. So he's saying, look, there's those of you who are seeing this who are Jewish who think this is a little different than the Judaism going on at the time. So you think now I got to become a Gentile. He says, no, you were born a Jew, you can stay a Jew. You were born a Gentile, you stay a Gentile. It's now your choice to act as a covenanted Israelite that makes all the difference. Okay? It's not about becoming something that you aren't. You started off, born either in or out of the covenant, because your family was already, a part of that. Now, this is when he says, then let each one remain in the same calling in which he was called. He says, were you called while a slave? It matters not to you, but if you are able to become free to, rather use it. So now he's talking about what you can do. A slave is something that is part of how your way of life is. He says, well, if you could be free, why wouldn't you change your way of life? You could have been a Jew slave, you could have been a Gentile slave. But he's saying, you're not changing the Jew or the Gentile part, you're changing the slave and the free part. And in your freedom, you're choosing the covenant. Okay? Did that help?
Yeah, I understand that a little bit better. Okay, so forgive me for this next one because it's kind of convoluted, but I've always wondered, since Jacob is the father of all 12 tribes, and the Most High chose the tribe of Judah, who is now considered Jews, how do you get Jews with the tribe of Judah? Where does that, how does that correlate together?
No, look. You've got a tribe called Judah, okay? Then you have a nation, the southern kingdom, called Judah. The southern kingdom had Benjamin also in there, okay? So you have two tribes. Remember, the 10 were taken away with the Assyrians, all right? So you have the two in the southern kingdom. Of course, there's a scattering of other tribe people who happen to be there at the time or whatever. And of course, there's some Levi there, because Levi was scattered amongst all 12. And so over time, you started referring to people of the southern kingdom, okay, as Jews or Jewish, okay? We are living here in the United States. We're also called Americans, okay? And so, because we live in North America, according to a designation that people have come up with over the years when they're making maps and whatever, okay? But then again, South Americans are Americans, Central Americans are Americans, right? Because it's just a different something in front of it and then American. But the world doesn't see it that way. We have gotten used to calling us Americans, okay? And so it's just the way that they started to refer to the people from the southern kingdom. It also, because they had a certain belief system, became what you would call the belief system. It was called Judaism. Okay, what Judah did in terms of their belief system. And so you have this now linking a people or a nation to a walk or a belief system. Did that help?
Yeah, so if I'm understanding you correctly, it's the tribe of Benjamin and the tribe of Judah who are Jewish. It's not just the tribe of Judah.
Look, at this point, I'm going to quote, I don't know who it was, I think it was maybe David Ben-Gurion or whatever, when they were first starting Israel, and they would say that Israel is for Jews and anybody who's a Jew can come and live here. And somebody asked, well, how do we know if they're a Jew? He says, if they claim they're a Jew, they're probably a Jew, because who else would ever claim to be a Jew? Okay? So that being said, all right, you need to understand that the Jewish lineage is usually just passed down from parent to parent where you're told that your family was Jewish by their claim of observation and everything else. It could have even been that they had converted and become Jewish, and then you became and understood that going down. But it's referring to both a tribe, which is one, Judah. It's also referring to a kingdom, which may have had any of all 12 tribes could have lived there in small percentages. Okay, it wasn't like if you were in the 10, you didn't get to live in the south. Okay, some of them had friends and whatever that they had, or they would marry into, or whatever, they were related to people in the southern kingdom. And when Assyria came, some of them ended up hiding in the southern kingdom, or they were already living there. So I believe that you have all of the tribes represented in some small percentages out of the people who lived in the southern kingdom, who would then think of themselves as Judah or Jews. Okay? And then as centuries would go by, parents told their children or taught their children that you are Jewish. Okay? Now, if you're not from Judah, you're Jewish. No, I just made that up on the spot. If you're Judah, you're a Jew. If you're not from Judah, you're Jewish. Okay. That's it. And that will be my best ever Jewish joke. Okay.
Just have one question. When it is a holy day on a Friday, when are we to do the food preparation for the weekly Shabbat?
Okay, so that's a really good question. All right, so understanding the rules of Shabbat and the rules of holy days. Now, of course, a little complicated when they're back to back. You are allowed to cook on the holy day that which you are cooking for the holy day. Okay, there's scripture that says you can cook what you're going to eat on that day. Of course, the Shabbat is the next day. Okay, so I would say one of two things. Either just make a bigger portion, so you're still cooking what you're going to eat on the holy day and you have leftovers. No problem eating leftovers then on Shabbat. Or if you want to eat something different on Shabbat, make that on Thursday. Prepare it, put it in the refrigerator, store it however you need to store it, because you can't cook for Saturday on Friday, because Friday is Shavuot, okay? You can eat on Saturday what you ate on Shavuot. Okay, Megan, did that help?
Yes, it did. Thank you so much.
So not a problem at all. I mean, I recommend that you just make a nice big meal for Shavuot, and you then eat the leftovers on Shabbat.
Okay, my question is about supplements. Can we have gelatin capsules?
This is a challenging question. I think we've addressed this as a right ruling so that, we have this. By the way, I want to say something. There's a need, okay? And don't listen wrong once you hear a certain word, it might close your ears up. There's a thing called the Talmud, okay? The Talmud is the arguments and right rulings that the Jewish community had come up with over the years. They claim that it's, directly whispered in the ear of Moses as an oral Torah, but really you see, if you read it, a lot of arguing by a lot of rabbis, okay, about how to come up with the right ruling. And there's not always a decision being made. You just get to hear the arguments, all right? We need for modern day times, that's what I was bringing it up for, some sort of a documentation of m.t.o.i. right rulings for those of you who are m.t.o.i. Okay, so that we can go and refer to things like this that have been brought up and then have a way to look it up. Because that's kind of was the point of the Talmud, was for the Jewish community to have a way to look up a particular issue that was handled in the past and the right ruling that was made. Okay? All right. So here's the right ruling that I gave about things like gelatin, things like porcine derived thyroid medicines, okay, these kind of things. I don't believe, this is the right ruling, I don't believe, Deuteronomy 17, trying to do the best I can, wisdom with Torah, that when Yah said don't eat pork, that it had to do with every little chemical that might be derived out of it to do something. It's actually eating it like a food, okay? And so if they derive a thyroid chemical from the thyroid of something that works, because I have a lot of people with thyroid issues, and they'll tell me they tried the bovine one, it doesn't work. They tried the synthetic ones, it doesn't work. But then the porcine one works. Something about the way our anatomies are more similar in some ways, okay? Now, we're talking about not eating the animal. You're taking a purified out, isolated chemical. Does that make sense to anybody? The same thing with gelatin, all right? They're isolating out a chemical to make the gelatin, the part of whatever they use to make the gelatin. So what do? I try, as always, to find alternate methods to get anything so that I can get a vegetable capsule for things, and et cetera, et cetera. And they're more and more available because people have issues and allergies to all kinds of stuff, and the world is getting more and more filled with people that are like vegetarian and that kind of thing. So they do generally make things in those kind of capsules. If the only thing that you can get is not that way, it's okay. Go ahead and take the medication. I'm not really concerned with a gelatin capsule. To me, that is not eating pig, okay? It's gone through so much processing that it's not like sitting down and eating, a ham sandwich, okay? All right, it's just not the same thing. Okay, so I don't concern myself with that, and I've made that right ruling for you guys out there as well, okay? Now, that's not to say that you should not be aware that he's watching the effort you make to avoid that if possible, okay? So did that answer the question, Janice?
Very much. Thank you. I would like to take the time to thank you so much for last week's teaching. You know, you say that we need to know ourselves. And when I listened to that teaching, I mean, I pondered it for days and realized that I just have the silliest things. And yes, a lot of it is because of Christianity. But I realized that my understanding of the flesh was this, you know, not based on actions, but, you know, kind of like with the covenants, not realizing that this is actual actions that we are called to do.
Right.
And so it's like figuring this all out, that I just spent most of my belief, you know, in Christianity with this mental assent rather than anything that was based on reality. And so I just want to thank you for straightening that out in my mind and resetting things. So thank you.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. I appreciate that. Look, I mean, if you read, and when you're reading, not if you read, when you read in the scripture, you'll notice that different writers kind of have some sort of different purpose than, say, another writer. Like the focus or kind of the issue or the reason that they're brought into this book, because a lot of people, you know, are mentioned in this book didn't write anything that you get to read in the book. I mean, there's a lot of apostles that we never hear anything from, okay? So you gotta understand that, again, when you read John has a very different kind of sort of focus than, say, James does, okay? Or say Peter does, or say Paul does, or whatever, right? These writers have sort of different emphases and different things. It seems for me that my job is to clarify terms. And so one of those terms that we've clarified through this teaching is the idea of what flesh is, okay? It's as part of understanding the battle of the mind and the battle between flesh and spirit and what those things are. Okay, so I appreciate that that's been a blessing, because that's really, I think, one of the purposes he's given me to do is to kind of clarify and reset our understanding of the words and ideas and terms that are used in the book.
First one we have is from Atomic Theory. Why do you guys like the ISR Bible so much?
Okay, I don't. Okay, it's not that I like it so much. All right. You know, when I first started, you know, coming into ministry and stuff, the ISR first came out, 1998, okay? And so I got one because somebody else had one, or somehow I heard about it right when it first came out. So I got one in 98 or 99 or something like that. So I got one pretty much right when they first came out, 99, I think. And that used to be the one I had up here that I was working out of. I mean, it was soft covered and starting to get a little beat up. And this one that I have also is a 98, okay, because that's the original one. I like that version. So when you say, why do you like it? You tend to like the one that you remember where things are, because you remember how it's worded in that particular translation. So you can find things a little easier, okay? Of course, you can use a concordance to look things up, but then if you're going to use the concordance, you got to know which translation the concordance is based on. If it's King James, and you have to remember how it might have been worded there versus whatever other translation you use to the wording, okay? So that's number one. This is the one that I kind of started with. And the reason I liked it was because I thought, I liked that it restored the Hebrew names to most things, okay? People and places are now the Hebrew name. I like that a lot, all right? Then as I got into more of a scholastic approach where I was starting to study the book and get into teaching what's in the book. And I was looking at the Hebrew and the Greek. So I'm looking at the translation that the ISR has. I actually like the ISR translation to whatever degree more than I've liked most others that I've used. Now, bear in mind, I've not used like thousands of different translations. Okay, so I can't tell you that this is the best translation, nor can I tell you it'd even be my favorite if I looked at other ones. Okay, so because I don't know, I have only looked at so many. Okay, I mean when I first came into any kind of New Testament, Old Testament belief, I was using the New King James, and so I kind of understood how that was kind of phrased. Then when I came into the Messianic walk, I switched into the ISR. Okay, now, when you say, why do I like the ISR? Because the only alternative really to the ISR would be something like the CJB, the Complete Jewish Bible, which basically is the NIV with some Hebrew. Okay? And I'm not saying that in a joking way. It literally is the NIV with some Hebrew. Okay, Zondervan publishes it, and it's the NIV. Okay? And Stern consulted on the NIV and got whatever permissions he got to do it that way. So all the things wrong with the NIV are wrong with the CJB. Okay? So, just so you know. And so, that's part of it. The other part of it, as far as the ISR, when you say, why do you guys like it? Well, they use it because they know I'm reading out of it. So, a lot of people are using it for the same reasons as me, that maybe they like it and think it's a better translation, but also, it's easier to follow the teacher if you're reading the same thing the teacher's reading. By the way, it used to be, and we don't have any teachings where you could hear this, but when I first started teaching, the 98 version was the only version out. There wasn't a 2009 also. I used to sometimes go to some place like, let's see, if I was going to like, I don't know, let me see something. Let's say I was going to like Hosea, chapter 10, okay? So I would tell people it's page 604. And that was actually on when we used to record on tapes. You'd hear me say, Hosea chapter 10, which is page 604, because almost everybody was using the ISR 98 like I was. Of course, if you're looking at it in the new version, the numbering doesn't line up exactly the same because they have not paged it exactly the same. And the footnotes are different, the amount of them and that kind of thing. So that takes up space, so it shifts things a little bit, okay? So now the last reason, for me the most important reason that I use the 98 version is that I have a somewhat, not literal, somewhat photographic memory. Okay, so I can't picture every word on the page, but I can tell you what column and what side of the page and which page something's on, which makes it easy for me to find something if I don't remember the address. You understand what I'm saying? So if I'm looking for Deuteronomy 10:12, I know it's going to be on the left page, about 2/3 of the way down the right column. All right? In this translation, and anybody has a 98, you can go look that up and see that I'm right, okay? So I'll pull it up here. Okay, Deuteronomy 10:12 is right where I said it would be, okay? So if I can't remember, one time I was trying to look for the place where Yeshua said, where it says about Yeshua that he spoke with authority, not like one of the prophets, but with authority like one of the prophets, like he didn't sound like everybody else. I knew that was at the end of the column, at the end of the chapter on the left. I knew where it was. I just didn't remember which gospel it was in. So I could quickly just scan that part of the book. That's why I like the 98 version. And some of you are like, well, why don't you use the 2009? Because I know the 98. I don't want to relearn a book. Okay? Now, on top of it, I do my own translating anyway. You hear this a lot when I teach. So it doesn't matter which one is in front of me from the teaching point of view. I'm going to fix the translations the best I believe it should be while I'm teaching anyway, okay? And so I've done that in the last couple of parts. You've heard me say things like, well, I think the wording is a little inside out or however it needs to be, all right? So short of making my own, okay, this is the best thing that I've got available to me. Now, the 2009 has made a bunch of changes from the 98, some of which I really think were pretty good, some of which I really don't like at all. But there were the creative choices that they made. As a matter of fact, I had a little bit of a discussion with a guy who was on the panel with the discussions about that stuff. I met him when I was in South Africa. And, I was like, well, next time you're going to make the next translation, call me. I'd like to have some input. Because I think that there are things that you guys could do to make this book better. All right? And so that hasn't happened. But apparently they are working on, and have been working on for a long time, another translation level, but they can't agree on a bunch of stuff, so they're still in that fighting phase, okay? Well, this is what happens when you have groupthink, all right? So it's hard to, in group decision making, it's hard to get something actually done, which we don't have that problem here, because that problem all falls on me, so it's simple, okay? By the way, one day, if I make my own translation, I still may have my photographic memory on this one until I learn my own new one, because I'll have to see it enough and know where those verses are and where they're on the page, okay? Because I know where they are on the page makes it so much easier for me to find them. There we go, thank you. All right. For all of you thinking that we're weird, go watch the Legend of the Coin video on the MTOI page, YouTube page, channel. All right.
All right, Rabbi. Deuteronomy 19:11.
Okay.
11 and 12. When I read this verse, I keep thinking, why would someone who lies in wait for their neighbor flee to the city of refuge? Wouldn't he want to escape that crime that he just committed? And then I think of, what type of person is this who goes to the city and it's basically a death sentence, correct?
Yeah, well, look, I mean, it's talking about the city of refuge from the idea that they're saying, look, you have different situations, and one of the situations is this is a person that did things premeditated. But maybe he thinks he's going to convince people that it was more innocent and that he needs to be protected in the city of refuge from the revenger of blood, from the person who wants, the family member that wants to kill him, okay? And so the thing is that there are verses talking about, and when it's searched out and found out, then this is how it gets handled, okay? And that's why it says, at the end of the verse it says, and they're going to give him into the hands of the revenger of blood and he shall die. Okay?
Yeah, pretty simple. And when I think of also when Yeshua said that about the murder, when you feel that in your, you say that in your heart, and you're guilty of that commandment, breaking that commandment. And so in kind of connecting those two together, I thought with a lot of the teaching of the freeing your mind, it's like almost as in that internal stuff that's going on, we're kind of our own elders. We're kind of our own police. It's almost like that verse that talks about taking captive. So if those things happen fast enough, maybe we can prevent ourselves from doing these crazy things, these sicko things.
Well, look, it comes down to step one, which I keep teaching you guys, which is getting more aware of yourself, what's going on inside, right? Because it's the more you're aware, the faster you can respond, okay? So you're absolutely right. But that's not going to happen until you become fast at responding. And the only way you're going to become fast at responding is becoming very aware of yourself. Okay? All right, thank you, Greg. Anything else?
There was one thing when you were speaking with Yanni earlier on Zone 2, and she did those mathematical computations about what one day is to Yahweh as opposed to us. If I have something that sort of spurs my creativity in a way that gets me fired up about the specifically, serving Yahweh, and it sounds like someone else may derive something from that might spur them on is that the kind of creative energy that people get when they write a book or do anything along those lines creatively, paint a painting, sing a song, anything like that? And it's kind of what it seems to be if it gives that the fruit, the aspects of the fruit that sort of well up inside. It's kind of like, well, just go for it. If it's of Yahweh, then He'll be the one to give it success or not.
Yeah, no, exactly. Well said. Look, when anything is created, okay, whether you create it or He created it, the creator of the thing, number one, it's an expression from inside them, okay? But number two, it's something they would like to communicate in some way. They want others to see it and receive something from it. And then thirdly, they may want it to evoke some sort of response, okay? And so you have these multiple layers of things that happen in the creation of something, okay? So when I do a teaching, I get a certain level of benefit from the idea that I got to express something creatively out there. I created something out there for the world to have access to. And then on one level, I'd like them to appreciate it and appreciate the effort and the quality and whatever it is that I produce, right? And then I'm also looking for a response. I'd like them, in this particular case, to be moved to action, okay? If I paint a painting, I may want them to be moved emotionally. I might want them to be moved in some other way, right? So there may not be an action necessarily to take, but a response that happens while you're enjoying the created thing. And so, I think the same thing with Yah when He made this world. I mean, we look at some of the incredible beauty that He put out there. That was just an expression of coming out of Him to show this is what He would create. And then, of course, He wants us to appreciate that. He loves to see us look at His creation and be like, wow, that is so amazing, right? And you enjoy it and this kind of thing. So, and it then moves you to maybe also create, or moves you in some way, whatever He's wanting to move you. So I would agree with what you said.
From Philip Marlott, do I tithe on unemployment insurance?
Okay, so, all right, so what is unemployment? Unemployment is payments as if you were working while you're not working. Okay, it's payments as if you were working, so it's income. So yes, you would tithe on that. Okay? You earned it, by the way, by having worked. So it's not just a benevolence, because your unemployment is going to be based on the work that you've done up to the point that you became unemployed. All right? So unemployment is income.
All right, from Joe W. What is the pattern for being under the Father's authority and covering starting in Genesis through Revelation for His called out assemblies and ministry that we need to follow?
I'm glad you asked simple questions. Do you have about a year for me to answer this question? Okay, now the pattern is very simple. Okay, the pattern for being under the Father's authority and covering is that you behave like you're under His authority and covering. And we see that patterned by people well and patterned by people poorly from Genesis to Revelation. Now, the instructions on what that looks like are given in the Mosaic instructions, what was given to Moses. Okay, the Torah instructions are explained as to the expectations of what it means to be under the Father's authority. What does it mean? He says that you're going to trust that everything He says is right and you're going to do what He says. He says, I agree to obey and trust everything that you say, knowing and trusting that it's the best and right answers for things for me to be doing or not doing.
From Manuel Perez Gonzalez, one of my daughters has begun asking questions and searching differences between beliefs. Should we help her or should we leave her to figure it out on her own?
I don't know what help her means, okay? So look, okay, This is a good question. Let me kind of just throw this out to everybody. I've kind of answered it a little bit in one of the other zones as far as child rearing. Every one of you, I'm talking about the adults who are here by choice, not the ones who like are children and your parents made you pay attention or show up or whatever it is. You have been on a journey. You have been on a journey in experiencing and trying to understand why you exist, who created existence, what expectations there may be, etc. You're on this journey, okay, to understand why. Like just generally, why? What is all of this? Why is it here? What's the point? Okay? Now, it says one of my daughters has begun asking questions and searching different beliefs. Well, when you become aware that there are other people that believe other things, why wouldn't you be curious what they are? I mean, you know, almost every one of you was not raised in this. So you're in this because you questioned. Okay? So don't fault them for questioning. Like I said, every one of you has been on your own journey. Every child that you have needs to go on their own journey. Not by you pushing them on it, but at some point they're going to realize, I don't have answers to some of these questions. I only know what you taught me. I only know what I experienced with you, and now I realize there's other options out there. Okay? You have to go out. Almost all of you have experienced lots of things that you thought might be great, and it turned out it wasn't so great. Okay? But you tried different things. You in your search for truth, you found things that weren't exactly truth. But some of you had found truth at some point and then still kept searching and went other places only to come back and realize that that other thing really was the truth, this thing. And so you have to have something to compare to. You have to have some way to have that thing to go, okay, I know what, it's back in the day, we used to have this whole weird commercials like, this is your brain and this is your brain on drugs, right? They had the egg frying and the whole thing. You have to kind of know, this is my life and this is my life in covenant. Life out of covenant, life in covenant. And it should be a fairly stark contrast. And in that contrast, you should say, I definitely want the one in covenant because the one out of covenant didn't work that good. Now, the one in covenant has its issues too, meaning life is still life. But there should be a stark enough contrast to realize I'm in the right place, okay? Because, this other thing just really wasn't getting me where I wanted to go. Now, of course, you can meet people in every religious persuasion who can convince you that they have that same experience. Life is better in their belief wherever they are, whatever they're feeling. You have to make your journey. Because ultimately what we're talking about is a relationship with the one that created everything. And so that's something you have to go out there and understand and seek and find and everything like that, okay? If you are married, well, let me rephrase that. If you're happily married, and by happily married, I don't mean 24/7, but I mean you're happy you're married, okay? Gotta kind of package this right. The person you're married to didn't just show up and then you were married to them. Like they didn't just boom, now you're married. You had to go meet people, date people, go through experiences with people until you found the one that you got married to that you're happy you're married to, okay? That doesn't mean you had to marry all of them, but you had to meet them, experience them, talk to them, vet them, whatever it was, okay? That's the way all things in life are. They don't just show up and then it's just there, okay? Some of you are like, oh, but my spouse just showed up. Well, but you still had to meet them and vet them like you did everybody else, okay? Maybe you didn't have to go looking for them. You showed up somewhere, they showed up somewhere, but still, lots of people you've met in your life, you showed up, they showed up, and it turned out not to be that person, the one that you would be happy to be married to, okay? I'm just giving you an example, all right? So when you say one of my daughters has begun asking questions and searching and stuff, should we help? Yes and no. What do I mean by that? I think you should help by encouraging her that it's her journey and it's her thing, and you should give her encouragement that she's certainly welcome to go and figure things out, okay? I don't think you should be supplying her with the materials for her studies, okay? If she wants to go on the journey, all that information's out there. I would still be saying, and as you go through the journey, I want you to feel that it's safe and comfortable to come and talk to me about things on your journey, which means you cannot blast everything that she thinks may be an answer different than what you're doing. Okay? The more intolerant, the more harsh your response to anything that she may go to do, and this could be metaphor to any of you with your children, the less they're ever going to want to talk to you about it. And then you're going to be useless in that potential journey back to where you are. Okay? You have to let them go and learn for themselves. That's what you did. And not maybe a few exceptions, but mostly none of you in your journey did what your parents wanted you to do. Okay? You didn't go down the belief road they wanted you to. You made other choices and experienced other things they didn't want you to. But you had to do it to get to where you are. Okay? And you know you wouldn't have listened to anybody at the time when you were making those choices either. But wouldn't it have been nice to have somebody who was safe to talk to about it while you're doing it? That would be a good sounding board without attacking everything you were doing? So yes, you should help in that way. Remember, I've taught you this many times. The role to grow into as they're growing up is to go from parent to trusted advisor. Okay? Trusted counselor. Someone they feel safe to talk to, knowing they're going to get advice and not scolding, corrective, whatever, on everything that they do. That's not to say you never correct or scold a child. I'm just saying is, when they come to you, they need to know it's safe to come to you. And my children know that if they come to me, I'm not going to hesitate to say, listen, I think you're making a big mistake here, but whatever. If it's something I think in life that's going to end up blowing up in their face. When it comes to the journey, though, I don't do that. The journey's personal. Okay? If they want to make other life choices, I might say, this, I'm telling you, may not go well where you're going. Okay? That I might say as a parent. Because I already know where that's going. I also believe I know where the journey's going. Eventually it's going to truth in Him. I just don't know how they're going to get there. That's between Him and them, right? All right, so hopefully that helps it. Okay, so yes, basically you're going to leave her to figure it out on her own, but you should be there available as a good sounding board to help through some of these things. So as she's studying different things, to say, well, have you considered this or have you considered that? Or how does this new thing that you're thinking is so great address this? Or whatever, okay? But don't do it in an attacking way. Don't attack what the choices are. Because all you're going to do is have them dig in their heels and be even more, stubbornly against you and against whatever just because you're doing it. I don't want them to reject this walk because of me. I want them to, if they're going to reject it, because of them. And of course, I don't want them to reject it. But whatever they're going to do, I want it not to be as a backlash against me. Well, you're doing it, so I'm never doing it because I don't like the way you were, the way what it did to you and the way it made you into this whatever, okay? Because then you're not letting the light of Him shine through you properly.